Right, welcome ladies and gentlemen. Sad about the weather, I'm afraid Lady Weather never really did like Lasham, and she obviously knew there was a lecture on today, and you can see what it's like outside. Just kicking off, Lasham's been open as a operational airfield for the best part of 82 years. Obviously if you tried to look at every single facet, we'd probably be here at 7 o'clock this evening, which some of you wouldn't be too happy with. So I'm essentially concentrating on what I might call the formative years, which is about the first 30 or so. But we will also be looking at very briefly the main factors, the key factors in the saga, and it really was a saga, of how we come eventually to own the airfield. That would have been in late 1998. Also, I'll be covering quite a few, in fact try and do almost all of them, of the notable tenants who've been at Lasham, some still here of course, over the years. And we'll be finishing off, in fact, with in my humble opinion, the most noteworthy, the best of the lot clients that Lasham has ever had. I wonder who that will turn out to be. So let's kick off, shall we? If I can just see the keyboard. Right. All right. So Lasham, been a community at Lasham for a very long time. Lasham village. It was first noted in the Domesday Book of 1086, and in those days it was known as Essaham. Slowly over the centuries it basically changed, Lesaham, Lasaham, Lasham, and then the last one, which has been used fairly recently, is Lasham, Lassam. I remember basically when I first came here, Imperial College, in autumn of 1965, a group of us went over to the Royal Oak, in Lasham village. It was just a backroom bar at that time with sawdust on the floor, and the locals looked as if we'd come from outer space, but they were sitting there basically playing draughts, dominoes, cards, and the name Lasham came up on several times, and I heard it, and we thought, where on earth is Lasham? Well, we were actually at Lasham. It's the Jervois family, who were very, very rich in their day, who bought their manor of Heriod. Well, they owned the manor of Heriod, and they bought the manor of Lasham. That's in its land in 1775. Can you speak? Daniel,
sit down if you can't see the screen.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
And the land that they purchased in the estate of Heriod in actual fact included the airfield as we know it today. The head guy back in 1809 was a chap called George Jervois, and in 1810 he constructed this mile-long beach avenue to commemorate the the Golden Jubilee of King George III. There's a picture by Thomas Hennell of the avenue outside, north side of the Lasham Clubhouse, and north side of the airfield. That would have been painted in 1941, just before the construction of the airfield started, and a great majority of a lot of the trees were actually brought down. That picture, by the way, is in the Victoria and Albert Museum, South Kensington, London. Now, it seems to be working automatically. Okay, I was going to one sec. You can just bear with me whilst I get my glasses to see where the P is on this. P. Yeah, picture was going to be, but you know what the answer. Who is this gentleman? Most of you will know him for sure by his stage name, but and some by his real name. But the thing is, what's the connection with Lasham? And it goes back a good while to the 1920s, basically. Private Godfrey, obviously, Dad's army. He was also quite a famous playwright. Well, I won't say famous, but he wrote a lot of plays, and he joined up with another chap called Merivale, and they produced a book called The Wrecker. This was on the West End stage, and in 1928 they made a movie of it, a silent movie, yeah, and that was made on the Basingstoke and Alton Light Railway. Help. Somebody has got at this. One sec. I hope the sound's going to be okay on this. We'll see.
Click projectile.
Projectile.
Yep.
Take a look at this.
Oh. All right, the sound's not good. It's a crash at the bottom of Lasham Hill. Spectacular crash for those days, really was. Some people still reckon it's one of the most spectacular crashes ever seen. The wrecker was a guy who was trying to undermine the railway in favour of a rival bus company, by the way, and engineered the crash. In the commentary, in actual fact, you would have heard that basically the driver was supposed to have jumped out, heaven forbid, just before he got to the crash site. I somehow find some difficulty in believing that. But that takes part on what is now the Alton to Basingstoke main road. And at that time was the railway, as I say, back in 1929. Not too many people know about that film because it was the silent era, yeah? But we'll hop on from that. One more observation about the Basingstoke and Alton Light Railway. The first station down the line from Basingstoke was Cliddesden, and back in 1937 there was a proper movie, with sound etc. produced, which is quite a famous one. Does anybody know what the name of that is? No, not.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, it is Mr. Porter. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, starred Will Hay, and as I say, it's if you ever get the chance to watch it, it's quite amusing. Right, the construction of the airfield. Jervois family weren't at all happy when they told they had to relinquish it to the the armed forces in September of '41. The issue was actually raised in Parliament, but wartime, and it didn't do them any good, and they had to let go of it, whether they liked it or not. The contract was awarded to McAlpines. They had two main sources of labour. One was a whole group of Italian prisoners of war who were housed in a camp down at Thedden Grange, a little bit outside Alton. and the others were a group of Irish navvies who were billeted down at Lower Froyle. The Irish navvies caused all manner of, they used to hang out at the Golden Pot, which is sadly now becoming part of history, but they caused all manner of problems, fights, and Lord knows what went on there. Yeah, the airfield officially opened on the 9th of November 42, but in fact it saw very little real use until we get into 1943. I'll just comment on that in just a minute. It was visited by the Luftwaffe once on the 2nd of January 43 when it was bombed and strafed by a Dornier 217. It's interesting, the whole world, gliding world at least, knows about Lasham Airfield, and the convention has always been for the RAF that they name the airfield with as per the nearest significant habitation, like a village or something like that. So it must have been a bit touch and go that they decided on Lasham, and it could be, if they'd chosen otherwise, that we'd the whole gliding world today would be talking about Herriard. Now, here's the map. Where's my pointer? See if I can get it to work. Couldn't earlier.
Would you be able to stop the YouTube video at the same time?
Don't worry about it. This is a map from 1931, and it's got imprinted on it approx area flattened, and that was a hill, yeah, where the northeast corner of the airfield is today, and that had to be removed by obviously the prisoners of war and the navvies. This is the shape of the camp as it was actually made. What's interesting about it is that down over here on the south there were woods in those days exactly as they are today, and all of the accommodation, the mess halls, the sick bays, the lecture halls, the dormitories, etc., they were all over there on the south side. And the camp entrance, which is there's a concrete block where the floor was at the bottom of the little lane just running outside down to the church lane, was actually just there on Church Lane. Couple of photos. Both taken on the 1st of October in 42. This one is which isn't so plain, isn't as good as the other one, is the more interesting one in actual fact. You can just see this little road. Well, first thing to say is you can see that they decided that it was going to be that the runways would be extended quite late in the construction, and this little road running on here is the Basingstoke to Alton main road. Runs through Lasham village, and before transport started to go boom boom, which I think was in this country 1894 the first car, basically it was all Shanks's pony and proper horses and possibly carriages behind them. But the thing about this is that little road here still exists today. Many of you will know the LVGC hut and the little road running up basically the side of it, just on the west side of it, to the gate, which so many of the 2XL people use. And that's how the road was. So very, very narrow. One thing I always find was rather fascinating is that if you just stand at the gate and look to the south, in the spring you'll see there's a whole mass of daisies here all these years afterwards, and it marks the exact spot of where the old main road used to run.
Actually, you can see it from the Lasham gate entrance as well. Yeah.
I won't spend too much time on this because the early arrivals, I'll say, this will be going up on the web, this presentation, so if you want to have a look at it and see who was here and when, you will see it from that. So it didn't really get going and until it became part of the 2nd Group Tactical Air Force, and it was known as Airfield 138. There were 4 main squadrons. They did an awful lot of operational flying from here. There was the 320 squadron, they were flying Mitchell bombers. Then 3 Mosquito squadrons, 613 City of Manchester, 305 the Polish squadron, and then 107. They were here till, we'll see a bit later, till a little bit after D-Day, but they did an awful lot of operational flying, mostly low level bombing, by the way. Some, especially by 613 squadron, quite famous raids. The Lasham Airfield, I should have said, was set up as a operational training unit, a bomber. It was unit. It was a satellite of Aldermaston, but it became pretty clear that it was no longer wanted by operational by the Bomber Command, which is why it switched to other ownership not long after it was first completed. Yeah. So the operational side of the station finished October 44 when the whole wing disappeared off to Hertford Bridge, which we now know today as Blackbush. And then the move basically for the ending it as a proper station started after the Mosquitoes have moved out. A couple of so-called group support units moved in. Their job was basically to supply squadrons with new aircraft and new crew. I think they must have had some sort of association with the ATA, that's the auxiliary air transport, who used to, that was mostly staffed by women pilots during the war. When we got a little bit later on, the GSUs were renamed group disposal centres, and rather than looking at supplying aircraft, their job was then to basically, they've got aircraft, was to scrap the things. We had 49 maintenance unit move in during 45, and then more interestingly, General Aircraft Limited, who quite an interesting company, took over 2 of the 4 T2s. Besides doing Mosquito overhauls, they did quite a lot of flight testing with tailless gliders, and it led to a tragedy with Robert Cronfeld, very famous glider pioneer, of course, in the 30s, and he came to the UK. He was a Jew to escape the persecution in Austria, and served the whole war as a RAF testing pilot, basically. Anyhow, in 12 February 48, they had this glider as shown, a tailless one, and they were took off behind a Halifax, towed it from here, towed it to 10,000 feet, cast off, and the idea, the intention was to do some stalling tests, which they did, or at least he had an observer with him, but unfortunately he got into an attitude that he couldn't get out of, and so they had to try and abandon. And whilst the observer safely did get out by using his parachute. The Robert Cranfield didn't and died in the crash at Lower Froyle. So yeah, this is getting to the end now. 49 MU, get out of Lasham. And the airfield was officially closed. It was being looked after by Odium in October 48. You got a picture here. We reckon this was taken in 49, and you can see the here's the avenue just running along here, and you can see the absolutely extensive nature of all the dispersals that there were. There's no, all gone, all part of history, no sign of them today. Similarly, you see this hangar here, that became known as the Star Avia hangar. We'll talk about that a little bit later. In fact, you can see 3 of the 4 T2 hangars there. There's the one that we're using, albeit renovated this day, and that up the top there is the western edge, is what became known as the Dan Air hangar. All right, finally gone into gliding. Dean Drummond was Tony Dean Drummond. Not only was he pretty damn good glider pilot, he was fairly, very famous for his exploits in the Second World War. He founded the Army Gliding Club, and they came in here in August of 1950, and then. And they had a T21. The Surrey Club, as it was known in those days, an Imperial College gliding club, had been flying from the start of 1946 at Red Hill. But Red Hill became more and more difficult to operate from, firstly because the amount of power flying that was going on there was increasing all the time and was conflicting with the glider operation, and secondly, there's a few stories about this which I won't go into here. The air traffic control officer there absolutely hated the gliders, couldn't stand them, and so they were looking for another home. Surrey Gliding Clubs, which was the main club, their main preference was Gatwick. Yeah, but the Air Ministry told them to, go away and think about it, because no way were they going to get Gatwick. They looked at a few others, but in the end, including Blackbush, but in the end, they came here, and they came here in August of 51. Been here ever since. One negative. All right, so we then had the Army Gliding Club, Imperial College, and the Surrey Club. One negative was basically the security of tenure that the ministry, the Air Ministry, who owned it, was they just only would allow 1 month. As they could say, right, get out, we want to use this station for something else, and just give so that really stopped basically any serious money being spent on the airfield, and was quite a negative until this all changed, as you'll see shortly, in 1961. Clubhouse used in those days was the old secondary control tower. I'll show you quite a good picture of that very shortly, and that's what that was, pretty well where the accommodation block is today, just to the east of the clubhouse, the renovated clubhouse. Yep. All right. 54, DP, Derek Piggott, arrived here to look after things from the RAF. The operation, as I say, to stop everybody standing on each other's toes and doing things 3 times over, they tried to cut down things so that there was more cooperation and less doubling up of things that was being done at that time. The launching, they had a couple of Tiger Moths. They also did launches by winch and auto, so they had all of them here together. The ratio would have been, or we'll talk about that just a sec. So 54, there's about 15,500 launches here, yeah. A bit over 500 aero, and the winch, which was so the auto car launches to the winches was about 3 to 1. So that's pretty well that's 1954 where things were getting going. 54 again, we saw Danair move in. Danair didn't start basically maintaining aircraft until the next year, but they moved in to occupy the Western T2 hangar. We hosted the 1955 National Gliding Championships, first one held at Lasham in August, and it was opened by Sir John Hunt, who obviously in those days was a very famous man, having very recently led the Mount Everest successful expedition. There's a second Tiger Moth came along, and it was pleasing for those who used to do the launching to have a covered Ford truck, because previously any launching that was done, all right, they wouldn't have done it in the rain, I think, but if it was damn cold, they would have regretted it and not been too happy. 57, and we start the Royal Connection. Duke of Edinburgh came and to the comp, opened it. Not quite sure why why they publicised this picture here, which is the chap from that's a chap, the chairman of the Derby and Lancs Club. Why he's been introduced, I don't know, but I've kept the picture because there, in actual fact, on the right, we've got one of the stalwarts of, well, the early gliding movement, and also Lasham here, Hugo Trotter. Lovely man. Very sadly, he died, I think what was Graham, was last year, January or something? Yeah. So there we go. Mostly famous names there, yeah, all the good arts, etc. One thing in those days, basically, that the score, if you're a commerce flyer, was just a maximum of 100 points a day, and they totted up all the scores at the end of it, and they used to eliminate your lowest score. In other words, your worst day, forget about that, and it's your 5 best days. That, in actual fact, would have allowed, if they hadn't have had that, would have allowed Tony Goodart to come second in the 403, and of course the 403, I only ever built one of them, is over in the GHC hangars. Now, there were still a lot of people getting in each other's ways with all the gliding clubs we had, and so they decided, right, we've got to have a proper central organisation. And that was formed in 58, the Lasham Gliding Society. That's when it came into existence. Though it didn't start operating as that until about mid-year in 59. Yeah, June 58, and the first serious accident occurred here. Surrey and Hans owned the prototype Eagle, T42 two-seater Eagle, and that hit a Sky being flown here. They're both cloud flying and banged together. That was the first ever UK cloud flying accident that's been recorded. The Sky managed, despite being badly damaged, to get down on the ground, okay, but the two instructors, well, the instructor and the pupil in the Eagle had to bail out, and both did, thankfully, successfully. 59 Nationals, not the greatest of comps, but very famous for one particular event, and that was the open distance day where Nick Goodhart declared what seemed impossible. He was going to fly to Portmoak on Loch Leven in Scotland, and he, after a big thunderstorm climb, he managed to find wave over the Pennines, and he did indeed miraculously, well, fantastically, get to Portmoak and landed in the rain, much to the amazement of all the people in the clubhouse.
There's an account of that in Rising Air, the paper version.
Yep. Now, dear old Wally, who did so much for this airfield in terms of being where we are today, Wally Khan, late 1960, and the ministry suddenly came out of the blue and said, all right, you can have the airfield, but you've got to pay 70,000 quid. And that was a lot of money in those days. So Wally set off to raise as much as he could, and he raised 17,000 quid. But then the ministry withdrew the offer, so that was all up the creek. But something very significant occurred mid-July, and the ownership of the airfield switched to being the no longer. Air Ministry was really interested in the RAF, and only the RAF in those days, and they were switched to the Ministry of Aviation. And September, and they said, well, all right, we'll agree a lease with you rather than a 1 month security tenure, and they agreed a 21-year lease. This is quite a good shot, in actual fact, for its for when it was taken. You can see the secondary control tower, which in those days was the Lasham clubhouse. Yeah. This one is interesting as well. We know this today as well. It's the members' workshop. For many years, it was known as Gordon MacDonald's workshop. But when it started, and it was built by Condor Engineering, Bobby Cole's Condor Engineering, who, as you'll see shortly, were responsible majorly for the construction of our clubhouse. It was actually built for the Surrey Club. I nearly said Surrey and Hants, but in those days it was still the Surrey Club. Nissan's here, that's became Ken Fripp's workshop, and that was the Lasham motor workshop for many years. Dave Drips and people like that. Alright, National 61. We were attracting some pretty big names in those days, some really eminent personalities. So the comp was opened by Ministry of Aviation. Prince Philip came in. Not only did he come in to see how things are going, he returned in the afternoon to check up. And it was finally closed by Lord Brabazon of Tarza. So 61 Nationals again, new scoring system, 1,000 points, boom boom. The eventual winner was John Williamson, with his wife there, flying an Ollie 419. Fantastic comp, 9 days out of the 10. The only reason they didn't have the 10th is that they all expressed that the fact they were too tired and they needed a rest day. Few new names cropping up there. Got George Burton here, yeah. Anne Burns, who has become a successful lady pilot. She won some nationals a bit later on. All right, Wally had raised 17,000 quid, and then he decided, right, I want to raise 40,000 overall, with an extra 23,000. Two reasons. One was the T2 hangar that we were using, same one we're using today, it'll be obviously very much changed. Was getting quite dangerous and needed a lot of restoration, renovation. And whilst that was being done, they moved the gliders across and stored them in the Star Avia hangar. That's up back lane, as I said earlier. And when they were bringing them in and taking them back, they had to cross the avenue each day. So that must have been interesting. They were also looking to build a clubhouse, a proper clubhouse, out of that all of that money. Another thing, they've all gone by abeyance now, but for many years here, you probably remember that we had a collector's plate that we used to go back and forth between ourselves and Dunstable. I don't think it's moved, Gary, has it, for many a long year now? Yeah. Capstans came in, replacing the T21s. We had the prototype here, 70, we had 3 of them. Had the prototype here known as Red Barrel. That was number 79. Yeah, I did quite a bit of flying in those. Once again, Prince Philip, 1963 Nationals here. He flew with in one of the capstans with John Everett, who at that time was the BGA national coach. Wasn't very good weather-wise. Lady weather wasn't at all happy, so they didn't get too much flying. League One, won by Pete Scott, the naturalist, flying a 419, and John Willie came second, also flying a 419. Now, as I said, it was Wally who raised the money for the clubhouse. Eat your heart out, but the original design, I'll show you the picture just a sec, was for a 2-story clubhouse. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had that today? But no, that was just a dream. We didn't have anything like enough money, so it had to be a single story. The actual structure of the building was designed by Bobby Cole of Condor Engineering. I think they were down in Winchester. Who was it? Oh, it was a chap called Frank Kinder who actually designed the clubhouse. Now, the original intention was to have the clubhouse opened just in time for the start of the Nationals in 1963. But the weather had been so lousy that they haven't even got started. So in actual fact, it wasn't until next year, 64, that it was completed and opened. There's what we dream about, what we might have had. Not a particularly good picture, but that's what it would have been as a 2-story building. Not a good picture, but taken by Godfrey Harwood. That was nearing completion in 1964. '64, and DP, who'd been here obviously since 1951, decided he wanted to go into the film industry, and he did the flying scenes for quite a few quite famous movies. Darling Lily comes to mind, and probably the one that most people will remember, Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines. Summer of '65, we stopped using winches just to tow cars, and that lasted all the way till 1988, when Terry Joint took over control here as CFI, and the tow cars went and were replaced by winches as we have them today. Interesting point. I was, bearing in mind I came here in late 1965, I was quite heavily involved in the tow car scene, and if you had a good day, a lot of people wanting to fly, we'd have 2 tow cars, 2 people in each, and if they knew what they were doing, basically you could maintain hour after hour all day a bit over 30 launches an hour. When you think about today, you think, ooh. Mind you, one negative in the sense that it was a fixed length piece of cable, so all you could do was get up to about 1100, 1200 feet. Whilst with today's winches, if the pilot knows what he's doing and the wind is nice and the tow car driver, most of them do, they can get up to 2000, even higher. So that's the other side of the coin. What do we got? 67 nationals. Yeah. Winner of League 2 there was George Burton, and there was another. Sorry, yeah. No, that was League 1. Another famous name starting to come into the sight is Ralph Jones, who won League 2. Obviously, Ralph was later to become one of our best known competition pilots. They introduced competition handicapping for the first time as well. Oh yeah, and they used cameras for the first time as well. Previously they'd had people, they had turning points. If it wasn't a free distance, open distance, they had people had to motor out to the turning points and sit there with binoculars and make a note of all the gliders that went round on their competition numbers. Oh. As I say, lady weather doesn't like this lecture, really doesn't. Very first regionals, that was held in July, won by Bill Cronfelt, who was the son of Robert. He was the Ice Sea Gliding Club CFI at the time. He was a bastard. He's the one, not really, he's the one pilot, he's the one CFI who ever grounded me. Which I thought was very unjust at the time, but there we go. So, also 67 saw the start of the national ladder. I think that might not be running under the same name today, but it's still going. First winner of the overall, flying anything you want, was Alan Pennell, and then for the just fly club gliders, it was another Lasham pilot, bit of an extrovert called John Barrows. Okay, 69, DP returns to Lasham, much rejoicing, and advert came out that he had come back to Lasham. He replaced Bill Scull, who went on who then became the BGA national coach. All right, quickly down through how it all transpired. As I say, key event 61, when the ministry sort of said, yeah, okay, we'll grant you a lease. Then 21-year lease, the lease was renewed in 82. Again, we made efforts to try and persuade them, Wally much involved in that, to try and sell us the airfield. They weren't interested. No, not quite sure why, but 1991 and the lease was renegotiated, and it was all the way out to 2045. Again, there was efforts to get them to sell, and main reason they came back with why they couldn't, it was important for national defence reasons, because of the RAE operation which was going on at the time here. But come 1997, And finally, the key RAE operations. RAE was running down, Royal Aircraft Establishment was running down its base here, and they were moved up to Scotland. And so the ministry, by then I think it was the Ministry of Defence, so who owned it, sort of said, yeah, okay, we'll prepare to start talking about you now owning the airfield. Patrick Nagley, still, well, he was chairman then, still the chairman today, second term chairman today. He was in charge of that, much helped on the legal side by Graham's dad, Pat Garnett. Wally was involved for a time, and they've quite a lot of fractious, difficult meetings, but in the end, basically, Patrick managed to get it all together on a one-on-one meeting, and they agreed back in 1998, and the final document was signed up in London 23rd December 88 by Patrick Nagley, and could well become the next chairman here, Ross Stewart. Alright, on to notable tenants. Dan Ayres. Dan stands for Davis and Newman. When I first came here, they had 3 Bristol freighters, which were just parked there, never saw them move. I think they were eventually scrapped. The 2 at the time, when they started, aircraft that they flew were 2 engine airspeed ambassadors and Avro Yorks. But their heyday was essentially in the days of the Comet, where they, at one time, they owned, heaven forbid, something like, they were the only Comet operator in the end, 49 of them. Many of them actually purchased from the RAF. In the end, they had to, back off and change, because the Comet was obviously an early jet aircraft, and it wasn't particularly efficient in terms of its fuel usage, therefore expensive to operate, and so they started to be replaced by BAC 111s and what else was there, and 727s. They ran into some problems, financial, and so it was purchased, the operation, by some people, quite a big big company in actual fact, called FLS, who are a big MR, maintenance, repair and overhaul company, and they held them here for about 3 or 4 years, but in the end they decided they didn't want it any longer, and the Lasham operation was sold to a company called ATC. ATC, that stands for Aviation Tool Corporation. That picture you see with all the paraphernalia all over it was produced by the Royal Daily Mail, nearly said the Royal Mail. The Daily Mail, which produced a long article about Lasham. The maximum aircraft I ever saw, I don't know why I used to count them in those days, was 31 outside the actual ATC premises. The reason it was so attractive for people to park Airfield, to park their aircraft here, was the airlines who didn't want to fly a particular type anymore, they'd bring them here. It was a lot cheaper than another nearby place that was used quite a lot for that, Southend, a lot cheaper than that. And then aircraft where the owners returned, that they were leasing the aircraft and returned them to the leasing company, who thought, oh, what are we going to do with this? Try and find a purchaser again. Where are we going to stick them? Whilst that's going on, we'll stick them at Lasham. In its heyday, ATC was one of the biggest employers in this part of Hampshire. We had something like that. They had about 800 people working for them. In those days, they used to work a day shift and then a night shift. They were going pretty well all the time. Oh, hang about, stop. One sec, hadn't quite finished that one. All things though now come to an end, and ATC started to run into some quite serious financial problems. Indeed, they went into administration in late 2015, and in the end they went bankrupt. By that time, Lasham operation had been taken over by 2XL, who of course are still there to this very day. But Lasham was quite lucky in that ATC went bankrupt with a total deficit of about £4.5 million, and all that Lasham lost, because fortunately the lease payments were almost up to date, was £8,000. Now, yes, the elephant. I don't know what its name is, but I want to know, what is the connection with Lasham Airfield? Anybody know?
Buried here, isn't it?
Huh?
That's buried here. There's one buried, supposedly buried here on the airfield.
You are right, it's buried. Chipperfield's circus back in winter of 48-49 wintered their animals here, and one of the elephants sadly croaked it whilst it was here, and they buried it in a pit outside. Bit of research, and we found that basically pretty certainly it's buried under, you see this little hangar here, which is used for two-engine twin that they have, it's buried under there. But please don't start digging without asking 2XL first. What's even more surprising is that, well, how the hell did they get here? Well, they came in by train, don't think it would have been first class, to Alton Station. And then they were, incredibly, they were walked from Alton Station all the way up to Lasham. Must have been quite a sight. Dear old Ken Fripp, a few of you might remember him. He and his son Mike Fripp used to run Southdown Aero Services, both sadly dead now. Southdown Aero Services continues to this day as a Lasham tenant, but they don't have anything to do with gliding. Staravia, that's the hangar up the, as we said, up the back lane, all completely gone now. Towards the end of its existence, there was a mass of aircraft up there, mostly jets. Some of them basically were from the Korean War and had got bullet holes in them. Yeah, but that in the end, I don't know exactly when it was, but I think it's in early 70s. It basically, they got rid of the whole lot, and the whole site was completely removed. Nothing there to visualize it, but it was truly, it used to be a mecca for aircraft enthusiasts back in those days who wanted to come and take photographs. RAE. They came in here, recorded as being in 1957, offshoot from RAE Farnborough. First to monitor the Sputnik 1 Russian transmissions, and for some reason it's due to low radiation, which was very favourable compared with Farnborough. They wanted to bring other operations here, and it built up into quite a big operation. You couldn't in actual fact were not allowed to go on the south side of the airfield. The road was blocked, and the instructions were do not go there. That is RAE territory, and Lasham is not allowed. There was a famous thing called the pole in the hole, which was about 30 foot down. There's a little laboratory, and they used to have a pole, 60-foot pole that came up, which held an antenna for testing purposes. We know exactly where that hole is now. It's under some concrete down towards the road, back lane. I don't think I'd recommend actually going to see what's left of the workshop, if there is anything, but it's still there, the hole, to this day, albeit obviously all covered over. So Lasham became primarily a satellite receiver station, and for many years the biggest satellite receiver had a big white radome over the top of it, which many of you will remember. And when you were coming back, especially on comps from the north, and you started to see the radome, that was always a great relief. You think, oh crikey, we're getting back, we're nearly back. Tony Newbury, by the way, ran the Lasham operation here for almost all the time, didn't you, Tony?
Not for many years, but yes, for a period.
Yeah. There was this hangar. Well, it's still there to this day. This Black Hangar Studios today, and we were always told don't go anywhere near that because it's very secret. But when the things started to be, relaxed a little bit, and we could go on the south side. I've been a nosy parker. I thought, well, I wonder what's in there. So, and I went over there, and the door was partly open, one of the hangar doors. So I thought, right. I went in, and inside there was a meteor. That was all that there was in there. And that meteor is now in the Baggington Museum. Air Scouts, I won't spend too much time on this. They were formed in they started flying here in about 1964. They built the clubhouse that we now know as the Lasham Vintage Gliding Club. They had a couple of aircraft used as bunkhouses for the cadets. First one was a York. That York is now at the Duxford Museum. The second one was a Comet. And they packed up about 78, something like that. So we'll just close it there. However, a couple of Lasham tragedies coming up. It's not surprising that if you're an aviation centre for so many years, it's not all smiles, etc. There's some periods of sadness. The T-21 Daisy was originally owned by the IC Club back in Red Hill days, so pre-1950. And it came here, and whether the Air Scouts bought it or they were just given it, not sure, but it became the Air Scouts mode of training. And then 23rd of May, there was a really nasty event. I was here actually on the day I actually witnessed the accident. Not a great day, but we were taking off from the western end of the main runway, and I was at the aero tow point, and we suddenly heard a bang and looked up to see that there were two aircraft circling about 1,000-1,200 feet in a thermal. One was Lasham K8. In fact, it was the K8 which, if there was going to be a problem, it was always going to be the blue one, 183. So it was 183 and the T-21 Daisy. Now, it was completely the fault of the T21 instructor because he'd been circling below, and he suddenly, they reckon, those that had seen it, he suddenly altered his where he was turning and pulled right up and struck the the K8 right underneath the pilot's seat. If it had been a wooden aircraft, almost certainly the pilot, and I'll talk about that in just a sec, would have been killed as well. The whole thing would have been smashed to bits. For the T21 though, it basically spiraled down. Witness this, it was remarkable. It was spiraling down and shedding wing spars like out of a gun. And when we went and later, 2 or 3 days later, went to retrieve the sad remains, glider remains, not far from Chris Garton's cottage, we found that all of these spars, as if they'd been fired from a bow, we were absolutely in a straight line, just right the way up the field for about 100 yards. Quite remarkable. The instructor was, I'm afraid, stone dead. But the air scout, the pupil, was a very lucky boy because of who we had on the airfield that day. One of my great mates was a chap called Stan Javitt, who was a real extrovert. He was a Surrey enhanced pilot. He also was a brilliant surgeon. He was the number 2 at St George's Hospital, then at Hyde Park Corner. And Stan, rushed over to the crash site, realised that the instructor had it, but there was still signs of life in the pupil. The ambulance arrived very quick, I think a lot quicker than it would have done today. And Stan went with them into the hospital, and when they realised who they had in the operating theatre, they said, right, you take over the operation. That would never ever happen today, but it did then, and basically Stan saved the young chap's life. Talking about the K8, it was flown by a lovely lady pilot, I always remember her, quite fancied her at the time, I have to admit, called Pauline Warger. She managed to get the glider down and land, but she was very badly shocked. And I think I'm right in saying that she never ever flew a glider again, which is sad. But about 2 or 3 weeks later, I was up at the main hangar, and Ken Fripp, who I knew quite well at that time, walked up to me and said, "Glyn, do you want to come and see something? I want to show you, something that we've got down at the Southdown Aero in our workshop." So I went there, and he had the K8 183 fuselage upside down and looking to repair it. It was tubular frame, of course, and that's what saved Pauline's life. The normal distance between the bottom longeron of the fuselage and the control rod, which controlled both the elevators and the ailerons, would normally have been about 5 centimetres. It was about 1 millimetre. So it was so close to being a horror story. But there we go, it wasn't, thankfully. Probably the worst instance that we've had, certainly from the point of view of publicity at Lasham, was a little bit later, July 71. It was the occasion of a big power boat race around the Isle of Wight. And we had some young pilot who was known to be a bit headstrong, and he wanted to take one of the Surrey Club Piper Cubs and go with his friend and go and look at the race. The instructor for the person in charge of the airfield today was Ted Ted Lysakovsky, and Ted said, no, the weather's, we're not flying, we've stopped flying, the weather's awful, so you cannot go. But the silly clot basically said, oh, well, he went, I'm not sure if anybody even saw him take off, but he did take off, and they didn't realise the aircraft was missing until 2 days' time. As I say, that was when, 28th of July. They finally discovered the aircraft, on the end of October. Somebody walking his dog in Ditcham Woods, which is a little bit to the north of Petersfield, and they found the aircraft had gone in vertically. A couple of badly decomposing yuck bodies in the cockpit. The bad issue, well, despite the fact that, with 2 pilots dead, the really bad thing for Lasham was that the pilot, other than the pilot, the guy who was his passenger was none other than Gus Benteen, who was the son of a very famous, wonderful comedian. Many of you might remember him, Michael Benteen, of One of the Goons, etc. Fantastic man. The papers got hold of all of this, and Lasham really got some heavy stick, deservedly so really, but there we go. That was not good days in the history of Lasham. Swaps, they were first formed in '79. Second World War Aircraft Preservation Society is what it stands for. You think, well, hang about, they never had any Second World War aircraft, but there you go. It was founded by a chap called Bob Coles, nothing to do with Bobby Coles, who mentioned as being responsible for the construction of the first Lasham clubhouse. He died in 2009, and all of the aircraft, actually amazingly, they all found a home in the museum. None of them were actually scrapped. One further comment on this, not sure of the exact date, but again I would happen to be on the airfield, and their big day where they used to have all their people coming along to do work on their exhibits, which are all outside by the way, was a Sunday, and they had quite a big car park, which is essentially around about where the first linear hangar is today, out on the northeast side, the one a little bit further to the west, and that was where the car park was, and they used to come along. Anyhow, we had a chap, he was a lovely Chinese student, I don't know why I remember his name, but it was Mike Alexander, and he took off in 296. Whether it was a winch or an auto tow launch, I'm not exactly sure the date, so I think it was probably an auto tow launch, and it all went horribly wrong, and he went into a spin at the end of it and crashed. He pretty well crashed on the Perry track, right opposite the swaps enclosure. Well, they were there and they were jumping. Mike thankfully was okay. He was not hurt. A bit shaken up, but not hurt. The glider was a bit of a mess. The next Sunday, basically, the word had obviously, because basically those who had been at the place were jumping around in excitement like so many Keystone cops. And the word obviously got round that, you want to go to Lasham for entertainment, because the next Sunday, they were queuing all up and down the avenue, waiting to get into the car park, including an ice cream van as well. I will move on from this. Black Hanger Studios, still there today. Don't seem to be doing very much. probably the most famous film I'm aware of that they were involved in making, especially at Lasham, was salmon fishing in the Yemen. As I say, don't appear to be that, but they're still there. Ah, hey, oh, hang about, sorry, need to shoot myself. One I've forgotten. It's all right, only one slide, folks. Us, the Gliding Heritage Centre. We were formed as a company back in March 2012. This was after Chris Wills, the founder of the overall Vintage Gliding Club, which he did back in 1973. He used to come and visit us at the LVGC hut quite frequently on Sundays. And when he sadly died in 2011, we found to our astonishment he'd left us £100,000 with the request that we build a hangar to house vintage gliders in, so that they were, kept safe and we could fly them. We had a grander vision, and that's how basically the Gliding Heritage Centre started. We became, as I say, a limited company in 2012, a charity in September 2012, and we had a 25 years lease from the LGS. First hangar, obviously, which we called the Chris Wills hangar, was opened in 2013. That was on the instance of the International VGC Rally, which was held here at Lasham. It was a Sunday, the first Sunday we held it. We had almost 300 visitors basically, and it was open basically. Well, there's Tony at the microphone, and the two guys who are going to open it are the grandsons of Samuel Cody, who is down as the person who first flew back in 1908 a powered aeroplane in this country from Farnborough Common. Now, I'm not going to say any more about the GHC. I think it merits probably a talk in its own right. All that we've achieved over these, getting on for 13 years now. And that really is it, folks. Any questions?
How much earth was removed to make the flat airfield? So, what was it, 5, 10, 20 feet? How much?
We'd have to have a look at that slide in case we could work out from the map, from the contours as to how.
It was 45 feet.
45?
Yeah, that's what I was told. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true.
It's quite a hill.
Have you got a date for the Daisy crash? That was the first aircraft I ever flew in.
Well, I think I said it was May. It's up there.
It's on the screen.
May 1970. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This talk is going to be put up on the website. There are a number of appendices adding more information, etc. Just to make it. That's Brenda Horstfield with Terry Thomas there, by the way. So this is going up on the website. And Daniel very kindly has been basically recording it, and probably a little bit later, once he's sorted it all out, the recording will also be going up on the website, the GHC website. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Glyn, for a fascinating talk. So I think we have another talk next month, it'll be the 3rd of February.
16.
16.
Yeah. The next talk is by a chap called John Treble, who's done an awful lot of research into the British Aircraft Company, who was one of the first ones to make gliders in this country back in the early 1930s. They were around, and the main man was a chap called Jimmy Low Wild, yes, that's right, who sadly killed himself in a crash, and the company was taken over by Robert Cronfeld. And so John is going to be talking about the history of, as I say, BAC, and then further when it came under the ownership of Robert Cronfeld.